You feel overwhelmed by daily pressures that seem to multiply endlessly, and every setback shakes your confidence while disrupting your inner peace. The stress follows you everywhere, affecting your sleep, your relationships, and your ability to think clearly while you watch others maintain composure under similar burdens. I am Marcus Aurelius, who maintained unshakable inner strength while ruling the most powerful empire in history and bearing the weight of millions of lives on my shoulders. Through my daily practice of Stoic philosophy, I discovered how to build a fortress of calm that no external pressure could penetrate, transforming obstacles into opportunities for growth. The principles I developed during plagues, wars, and the crushing responsibility of absolute power will give you the tools to master yourself completely in just 90 days. But first, like this video, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom and comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far the need for inner mastery has spread across the world. I never asked for the purple cloak. When Emperor Antoninus Pius adopted me, I was a young man more interested in philosophy than politics, more drawn to quiet contemplation than the roar of the Colosseum crowds. Yet there I stood on that March day in 161 AD as senators draped the heavy purple fabric across my shoulders, a weight far greater than its physical mass. You think your daily pressures are overwhelming? Imagine waking each morning knowing that every decision you make affects 60 million souls. Imagine holding the power of life and death over citizens stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Germania to Africa. Every choice rippled across an empire larger than any before or since. The purple cloak became my teacher in ways no philosopher's texts ever could. Within days of my coronation, barbarian tribes tested our northern borders. Senators plotted in shadowed corridors. The treasury demanded attention. Citizens sought justice. Military commanders required orders. Every moment brought decisions that could save or destroy thousands of lives. I learned quickly that external power without inner mastery is merely chaos wearing a crown. The pressures threatened to consume me entirely. I found myself reacting emotionally to every crisis, losing sleep over decisions beyond my control, allowing the weight of responsibility to crush my spirit. I was drowning in the very power that was supposed to elevate me. The isolation was perhaps the heaviest burden. When you hold ultimate authority, people tell you what they think you want to hear, not what you need to know. Friends become courtiers. Conversations become performances. Trust becomes a luxury you cannot afford. I discovered that the higher you rise in external power, the more alone you become in your struggles. Late one night, as I sat surrounded by scrolls detailing another border conflict, another Senate dispute, another impossible decision, I realized something profound. I was trying to control an empire while I could not even control my own mind. How could I bring order to the world when my thoughts raced chaotically from crisis to crisis? How could I lead others when I had not learned to lead myself? That moment of recognition became my liberation. I understood that true power, the only power that matters, flows from self-discipline, not from purple cloaks or golden thrones. The emperor who cannot master his own reactions will always be a slave to circumstances, no matter how many legions march at his command. I began to see every external pressure as an opportunity to practice internal strength. Each crisis became a chance to demonstrate composure. Every difficult person became a teacher of patience. Every setback became practice for resilience. The empire's problems had not changed, but my relationship to those problems transformed completely. The purple cloak taught me that leadership begins with self-leadership. You cannot give what you do not possess. You cannot inspire confidence while drowning in anxiety. You cannot make wise decisions while enslaved to emotional reactions. The foundational work of any person in any position is the work of mastering themselves. This is why I developed the practices I am about to share with you. Not because I was naturally calm or inherently wise, but because I was forced to choose between self-mastery and self-destruction. The empire would have crumbled under a leader who remained at the mercy of his own uncontrolled mind. The irony is beautiful. In learning to rule myself, I finally became capable of ruling others, in accepting the limits of my control over external events. I discovered the unlimited power I possessed over my internal responses. The purple cloak no longer felt heavy because I had built the inner strength to carry it with grace. This is the path I will teach you over the next 90 days. Not the path to external empire, but to the inner sovereignty that makes all other achievements possible. The year 165 AD brought death to my doorstep in ways I never imagined. The Antonine Plague swept across our empire like a merciless tide, claiming millions of lives and testing every principle I thought I understood about leadership and virtue. If the purple cloak taught me about responsibility, the plague years forged my understanding of true inner strength. Picture this: entire cities emptying as disease spreads faster than wildfire. Trade routes abandoned, legions decimated not by enemy swords, but by invisible death. Citizens looking to their emperor for answers I did not possess, for solutions to problems beyond any mortal's control. The plague showed me that all my philosophical studies meant nothing if I could not apply them when faced with genuine catastrophe. I remember standing in the palace courtyard one morning, watching smoke rise from funeral pyres that burned day and night. The air itself seemed poisoned with fear and grief. My advisors brought reports of entire families wiped out, of soldiers collapsing at their posts, of desperate citizens fleeing Rome only to carry death with them to distant provinces. The weight of their suffering pressed down on me heavier than any crown. In those dark hours, I faced a choice that every leader, every person, must eventually confront. Would I allow external chaos to create internal chaos, or would I use this crisis to develop unshakable inner stability? The plague could destroy my empire, but I would not let it destroy my character. This was when I truly began my daily philosophical practice, not as academic exercise, but as spiritual survival. Each morning before dawn, while the city slept fitfully, between death and dawn, I would retreat to my private chambers and write, not laws or decrees, but thoughts, reflections, reminders to myself about what remained under my control when everything seemed beyond it. I discovered that we cannot control plagues, but we can control our response to plagues. We cannot prevent death, but we can choose how to live in its shadow. We cannot eliminate suffering, but we can refuse to add unnecessary suffering through our own mental chaos and emotional reactions. The plague taught me that external events, no matter how terrible, are neutral until we assign meaning to them. The same disease that drove some citizens to despair drove others to heroic acts of service. The same mortality that made some people bitter made others more compassionate. The difference was not in their circumstances, but in their chosen responses to those circumstances. I learned to see the plague as my teacher rather than my enemy. Every day it remained. It gave me opportunities to practice courage, compassion, and calm leadership. Every citizen who looked to me for stability forced me to develop the inner strength necessary to provide it. Every impossible decision required me to separate what I could influence from what I could not. This crisis revealed the poverty of depending on external conditions for inner peace. Those who built their happiness on health discovered how fragile that foundation was. Those who relied on certainty found themselves shattered by uncertainty. But those who cultivated inner resources, virtue, wisdom, self-discipline, found themselves equipped for any storm. During the worst months, when death seemed to stalk every street and hope appeared lost, I made a discovery that changed everything. The human spirit becomes strongest precisely when external conditions become weakest. When the plague stripped away every external comfort and security, what remained was the irreducible core of human dignity and choice. This is when I truly understood that we carry within ourselves an inner citadel that no plague, No enemy, no circumstance can touch without our permission. The plague could take my health, my empire, even my life, but it could not touch my commitment to virtue, my practice of wisdom, or my choice to respond with courage rather than cowardice. The plague. Years ended, but the lessons they taught became the foundation of everything I would later write and teach. Crisis does not create character, it reveals it. And when we choose to meet crisis with disciplined practice rather than chaotic reaction, we forge strength that no external force can break. The concept that would reshape my understanding of human potential came to me during a particularly difficult winter campaign along the Danube frontier. As I sat in my tent, surrounded by maps of barbarian territories and reports of enemy movements, I realized that while I could not control the weather, the enemy's strategy, or even the loyalty of my own generals, there remained one fortress. That was absolutely impregnable, the citadel of my own mind. This inner citadel became the cornerstone of everything I would teach about self-mastery. Unlike physical fortresses that can be besieged, undermined, or overwhelmed, the fortress of a disciplined mind becomes stronger under attack. Every external pressure that seeks to disturb your peace becomes, paradoxically, an opportunity to reinforce your inner defenses. Most people live their entire lives as refugees from themselves, seeking security in external circumstances that constantly shift and change. They build their peace of mind on promotions that may never come, relationships that may end, health that will inevitably decline, and possessions that can be lost or stolen. These people remain forever vulnerable because they have placed their inner stability in the hands of forces beyond their control. But when you understand the inner citadel, everything changes. You discover that you possess an unassailable refuge that exists independent of external conditions. This fortress is built not of stone and mortar, but of principles and practices. Its walls are raised through daily discipline, its gates defended by wisdom, its towers strengthened by virtue. I developed 3 fundamental disciplines that construct and maintain this inner citadel. First is the discipline of perception, learning to see things as they truly are, not as our fears or desires would have us believe them to be. Most human suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our judgments about those events. When you master perception, you realize that nothing can disturb you without your permission. The second discipline is the discipline of action, responding to circumstances with wisdom and virtue rather than reacting from emotion or impulse. This means acting in accordance with your highest values regardless of external pressures or temptations. When you master action, you become the author of your own character rather than its victim. The third discipline is the discipline of will, accepting what cannot be changed while focusing your energy on what can be influenced. This is perhaps the most difficult discipline because it requires surrendering the illusion of control over things beyond our power while taking complete responsibility for things within our power. These 3 disciplines work together like the 3 walls of a fortress. When your perception is clear, your actions virtuous, and your will properly directed, you become effectively invulnerable to external disturbance. This does not mean you become insensitive or uncaring, quite the opposite. It means you respond to life from a place of strength rather than weakness, wisdom rather than ignorance, love rather than fear. The inner citadel is not a place of retreat from the world, but a place of engagement with the world from a position of strength. When you know that your core cannot be touched by external events, you become free to act courageously, love deeply, and serve fully without fear of loss or disappointment. I learned this philosophy not in peaceful libraries, but in the brutal realities of war, plague, political betrayal, and personal loss. Every test life gave me became an opportunity to prove that this inner fortress could withstand any siege. Every person who tried to manipulate me with anger found themselves confronting walls they could not breach. Every circumstances that threatened to overwhelm me discovered an inner strength that grew stronger under pressure. The revolutionary truth is this: suffering comes not from external events, but from our resistance to external events. When you stop fighting what you cannot control and start mastering what you can control, suffering transforms into strength, obstacles become opportunities, and every challenge becomes a chance to practice virtue. This is the philosophy that sustained me through 19 years of empire building, plague fighting, and war making. And this is the foundation upon which you will build your own transformation over the next 90 days. The inner citadel awaits construction. Let us begin building it together. Your first 10 days of transformation begin with the most fundamental skill any human being can develop: learning to see reality clearly. I call this the discipline of perception, and it forms the foundation upon which all other forms of self-mastery are built. Without clear perception, you remain forever at the mercy of illusions, fears, and false judgments that create unnecessary suffering. When I first assumed the purple, I discovered that my initial reactions to events were rarely based on facts, but on stories I unconsciously created about those facts. A senator's frown became evidence of a conspiracy. A delayed message became proof of betrayal. A military setback became a sign of impending disaster. I was not responding to reality, but to my interpretations of reality. And those interpretations were usually wrong. The discipline of perception requires you to separate what actually happens from the meanings you attach to what happens. This sounds simple, but it represents perhaps the most difficult mental work any person can undertake. We are story-creating machines, constantly spinning narratives about why things occur, what they mean for our future, and how we should feel about them. For your first 10 days, I want you to practice what I call initial impression control. The moment something challenging happens, a critical email, an unexpected setback, a difficult conversation, pause before your mind begins its storytelling process. Ask yourself, what actually happened here, stripped of all interpretation? Let me give you an example from my own experience. Early in my reign, a trusted general sent a message that simply read, "The Northern Campaign faces complications." My initial reaction was immediate panic. My mind created elaborate stories: total military defeat, loss of territory, personal failure as a leader, the beginning of imperial collapse. But when I applied the discipline of perception, I realized that complications was just a word. It contained no specific information about the nature, severity, or implications of whatever challenges existed. My panic was based entirely on stories I had invented about a single, vague word. This practice transforms your relationship to every challenging situation. Instead of being overwhelmed by your interpretations, you deal only with facts. Instead of fighting imaginary battles, you respond to actual circumstances. Instead of carrying the weight of catastrophic possibilities, you focus on present realities. During these first 10 days, also practice viewing obstacles as training rather than punishment. Every difficult situation becomes an opportunity to strengthen your character, develop new skills, or practice virtues like patience, courage, and wisdom. This shift in perspective transforms your relationship to adversity completely. I learned this during my frontier campaigns when harsh weather, difficult terrain, and enemy resistance initially felt like cruel obstacles preventing me from achieving my goals. But when I began seeing these same challenges as perfect training grounds for developing military excellence, they stopped being problems and became valuable teachers. Your morning practice for these 10 days should include what I call mental preparation. Each morning, before engaging with the world, spend a few minutes considering what challenges you might face and how you can respond to them with virtue rather than reaction. This armor plating of the mind prevents external events from catching you unprepared. Your evening practice should include what I call perception review. Each night, examine the day's events and identify moments when you created unnecessary suffering through false interpretations. Notice the difference between what actually happened and the stories you told yourself about what happened. This practice gradually trains your mind to see more clearly in real time. Remember, the goal is not to become emotionless or detached from life, but to ensure that your emotions are based on reality rather than illusion. When you master perception, you respond to actual events with appropriate feeling rather than reacting to imagined catastrophes with unnecessary panic. This first discipline creates the foundation for everything that follows. Clear perception leads to wise action, and wise action leads to genuine peace of mind. Begin today, and within 10 days, you will notice a dramatic difference in your relationship to life's inevitable challenges. The inner citadel's construction begins with learning to see truly. The second 10 days of your transformation focus on what I discovered to be the most powerful period of any day, the first hour after awakening. How you begin each morning determines not just your mood, but your character development, your resilience under pressure, and your ability to respond wisely to whatever challenges await you. I learned the power of morning preparation during my darkest period as emperor, when it seemed every dawn brought news of fresh disasters. Barbarian invasions, senatorial conspiracies, economic troubles, plague outbreaks. Each morning felt like opening a door to chaos. I realized I was beginning each day reactive and defensive, already defeated before the first challenge arrived. This is when I developed what became my most sacred practice, the daily morning preparation ritual. Before any advisor could reach me, before any urgent message could disturb my peace, I would spend the first hour of each day armoring my mind for whatever battles lay ahead. This practice transformed not just my days, but my entire reign. Your morning ritual should begin the moment you awaken, before your mind becomes cluttered with the day's concerns. Spend the first few minutes in what I call gratitude orientation. Identify 3 specific things you appreciate about your life, not generic concepts like health or family, but particular details that genuinely move you. This practice trains your mind to notice abundance rather than scarcity, strength rather than weakness. Next, engage in what I term character intention setting. Choose one virtue you want to practice especially well that day: patience, courage, justice, wisdom, compassion. Visualize specific situations where you might need this virtue and imagine yourself responding excellently. This mental rehearsal prepares you to act from your highest self rather than reacting from impulse or emotion. The most crucial element of morning preparation is premeditatio malorum, deliberately imagining potential difficulties you might face and mentally preparing virtuous responses to them. This is not pessimistic thinking, but realistic preparation. By anticipating challenges and rehearsing wise responses, you remove their power to overwhelm or surprise you. For example, if you have a difficult meeting scheduled, spend a few minutes imagining various ways it could unfold challenging. Picture yourself responding with patience if others become angry, with clarity if discussions become confused, with our courage if you need to speak difficult truths. This mental preparation means you enter challenging situations already equipped with planned responses rather than hoping you will react well in the moment. I also practiced what I call role remembrance, each morning reminding myself of my responsibilities and the character I wanted to embody in fulfilling them. As emperor, I would remind myself that I serve the people, not myself, and that every decision should reflect wisdom and justice, rather than personal preference or convenience. Your morning preparation should include physical readiness as well as mental preparation. I always began with simple physical exercises that awakened my body and demonstrated my commitment to discipline. This might be basic stretches, brief calisthenics, or even just careful attention to posture and breathing. The key to effective morning preparation is consistency and brevity. This practice should take no more than 15 to 20 minutes, but those minutes create the foundation for everything that follows. Miss your morning preparation, and you spend the entire day playing defense. Complete your morning preparation, and you begin each day as the author of your own experience. During these 10 days, pay attention to the difference between mornings when you prepare intentionally and mornings when you rush immediately into activity. You will discover that the small investment of time in morning preparation pays enormous dividends in peace of mind, clarity of thought, and quality of responses throughout the day. This practice builds what I call proactive character, the ability to respond to life from your values rather than reacting from your circumstances. The third 10 days of your journey address what may be the most practical skill for daily life, learning to respond rather than react to emotional provocations. During my years as emperor, I discovered that emotional regulation is not about suppressing feelings, but about choosing your responses consciously rather than allowing circumstances to choose them for you. I learned this lesson most powerfully during a heated Senate session where a particular senator repeatedly questioned my policies with what seemed like deliberate disrespect. My initial impulse was anger, hot, immediate, and completely justified by his behavior. But in that moment of rising fury, I made a choice that changed everything. I stepped outside myself and observed my own emotional reaction as if I were watching another person experience it. This technique, which I call the observer's perspective, became one of my most valuable tools for emotional regulation. Instead of being carried away by anger, fear, frustration, or disappointment, I learned to create a small space between myself and my emotions, just enough distance to choose my response rather than being controlled by my reaction. The key insight is this: you are not your emotions. You are the consciousness that experiences emotions. This distinction creates the freedom to feel whatever arises while choosing how to respond to what you feel. Emotions become information rather than commands, weather patterns in the sky of consciousness rather than the very air you breathe. For these 10 days, practice what I call the pause technique. Whenever you notice strong emotions arising, the moment you feel anger, anxiety, frustration, or disappointment beginning to build, mentally step back and observe the emotion as you might observe a cloud passing across the sky. Notice its quality, its intensity, its physical sensations, but do not immediately act from it. In that pause, ask yourself 3 questions that I used throughout my reign. What would my highest self do in this situation? What response would I be proud of tomorrow? How can I use this moment to practice virtue rather than indulge reaction? These questions shift you from reactive mode to responsive mode, from being controlled by circumstances to choosing your character. I discovered that anger in particular is always a choice rather than an automatic response. When someone acts in ways that trigger our anger, we can choose to see their behavior as evidence of their own inner turmoil, rather than as a personal attack on us. Most people who act badly are suffering in ways we cannot see. Responding with patience and understanding often diffuses situations that reaction with anger would only escalate. Fear, too, becomes manageable when you realize that most fear concerns future events that may never occur. The practice of returning your attention to present reality, what is actually happening right now, rather than what might happen later, dissolves much unnecessary anxiety. I learned to ask myself, what is actually threatening me in this precise moment? The answer was usually nothing. During these days, also practice what I call emotional alchemy, the transformation of difficult emotions into character development opportunities. Instead of seeing anger as a problem, view it as practice for patience. Instead of seeing fear as weakness, see it as an opportunity to develop courage. Instead of seeing disappointment as suffering, see it as training for resilience. The goal is not to become emotionless. Emotions provide valuable information about our values and our environment. The goal is to become emotionally sovereign, experiencing feelings fully while maintaining the freedom to choose virtuous responses regardless of what you feel. By the end of these 10 days, you will have developed what I consider the hallmarks of emotional maturity, the ability to feel whatever arises while maintaining your commitment to responding with wisdom, courage, justice, and compassion. This is the difference between being a slave to your emotions and being their master. The fourth stage of your transformation teaches perhaps the most revolutionary principle I discovered during my reign. The impediment to action advances action, and what stands in the way becomes the way. This is not mere philosophical wordplay, but a practical approach that transforms your relationship to every challenge you will ever face. I learned this principle during one of my most frustrating military campaigns along the Germanic frontier. We had planned a decisive offensive against barbarian tribes, but unexpected flooding made our intended route impassable. My general saw this as a devastating setback that would delay our plans for months. But as I studied our maps that evening, I realized the flooding had actually created a strategic opportunity we never would have discovered otherwise. The flooded terrain forced us to take a longer route through territory the enemy considered secure. Because they never expected an attack from that direction, their defenses were minimal. What initially appeared to be an obstacle preventing our advance actually became the key to our most successful campaign. The impediment had indeed advanced our action, and what stood in our way became the way to victory. This experience taught me to look for the hidden advantage in every apparent disadvantage. Every obstacle contains within it the seeds of opportunity, but only if we approach it with the right perspective. The same circumstances that defeat one person become the foundation for another person's breakthrough. During these 10 days, I want you to practice what I call obstacle transformation. Whenever you encounter a difficulty, a work setback, a relationship challenge, a financial pressure, a health concern, immediately ask yourself 3 questions. How might this challenge make me stronger? What skills or qualities might this situation help me develop? How could this apparent problem actually serve my highest good? This is not about forcing false optimism or pretending that difficult situations are actually pleasant. This is about training your mind to find the genuine opportunities for growth, learning, and character development that exist within every challenge. When you consistently look for these opportunities, you begin to find them everywhere. I remember when a trusted advisor betrayed my confidence and shared sensitive information with my enemies. My initial reaction was anger and feelings of personal violation. But when I applied obstacle transformation, I realized this betrayal actually taught me valuable lessons about evaluating character, protecting sensitive information, and developing systems that did not depend on any single person's loyalty. The betrayal that initially seemed to weaken my position actually strengthened my leadership capabilities. Practice seeing setbacks as setup for comebacks. View criticism as information about areas for improvement. See rejection as redirection toward better opportunities. Consider delays as chances to improve your preparation. This shift in perspective does not change external circumstances, but it dramatically changes your relationship to those circumstances. Also practice what I call gratitude for difficulties. This seems counterintuitive, but I learned to appreciate challenging situations because they provided opportunities to practice virtues that comfortable circumstances never could. Easy times may bring pleasure, but difficult times build character. Smooth sailing teaches nothing about navigation, but storms create masterful sailors. The key insight is that your obstacles are not random inconveniences blocking your path to happiness. They are specifically designed training programs for developing the exact qualities you need to reach your highest potential. The universe is not working against you, it is working to strengthen you, but only if you cooperate with the process. During these days, maintain what I call an opportunity journal. Each evening, Write down the main challenges you faced that day and identify at least one potential benefit or growth opportunity within each challenge. This practice trains your mind to automatically look for hidden advantages rather than automatically assuming disadvantage. By the end of these 10 days, you will have developed what I consider one of the most powerful mindsets possible: the ability to transform any obstacle into an opportunity for advancement. This perspective makes you effectively unstoppable because every setback becomes a setup for greater success. The fifth stage of your transformation moves from philosophical understanding to practical application. The discipline of action requires you to bridge the gap between knowing what is right and actually doing what is right, between understanding virtue in theory and embodying virtue in practice. This is where character is truly built, not in comfortable reflection, but in the crucible of decision and action. During my campaigns along the Danube, I faced a situation that tested every principle I claimed to believe. A Germanic chieftain had been captured after leading raids that killed hundreds of our citizens. Military tradition and popular demand called for his public execution as an example to other potential enemies. The politically safe choice was obvious, and every advisor recommended swift, brutal justice. But as I considered this decision, I realized that my response would reveal whether my commitment to justice was genuine or merely convenient. True justice considers not just punishment, but the broader implications of our actions. Would executing this chieftain actually prevent future raids, or would it create a martyr who inspired even greater resistance? Would this action reflect the wisdom and restraint I wanted to embody as emperor? The discipline of action required me to act from my principles rather than from political expediency or emotional reaction. I chose to spare the chieftain's life, while ensuring he could never again threaten our citizens. This decision was unpopular with many Romans, but it ultimately led to diplomatic opportunities that prevented far more bloodshed than execution would have accomplished. This experience taught me that courage is not just physical bravery in battle, but moral bravery in daily decisions. The discipline of action means doing what is right, even when it is difficult, unpopular, or personally costly. It means acting from your values rather than from your fears, your convenience, or your immediate desires. For these 10 days, practice what I call values-based decision-making. Before making any significant choice, how to respond to a difficult email, how to handle a workplace conflict, how to spend your evening hours, pause and ask yourself, what would the person I aspire to be do in this situation? Then, do that thing, regardless of what your emotions, habits, or convenience would prefer. This practice sounds simple, but it requires tremendous discipline because it often conflicts with easier or more immediately gratifying options. The person you aspire to be might exercise instead of watching television, might have the difficult conversation instead of avoiding it, might choose patience instead of anger, might select courage instead of comfort. Also practice what I call proactive virtue. Instead of waiting for circumstances to force you to act courageously, patiently, or justly, look for opportunities to practice these qualities voluntarily. Seek out chances to help others, to speak truthfully, to act with integrity, to demonstrate compassion. This transforms virtue from a response to challenges into a proactive way of engaging with life. The discipline of action also requires learning to act decisively in the face of uncertainty. Perfect information is rarely available, and waiting for complete certainty often means missing opportunities or failing to act when action is needed. I learned to make the best decisions possible with available information, then to adjust course as new information emerged. Practice what I call progress over perfection. Take action that moves you toward your goals and values, even if that action is imperfect. Better to attempt virtuous action and make mistakes than to avoid action while waiting for the perfect moment or perfect understanding. During these days, also focus on consistency over intensity. Small, virtuous actions performed consistently build stronger character than dramatic gestures performed occasionally. Choose to act with integrity in small, daily decisions, and you will find yourself naturally acting with integrity when facing larger challenges. The goal is to eliminate the gap between your values and your actions, between who you want to be and how you actually behave. When this alignment is achieved, you experience the deep satisfaction that comes from living authentically according to your highest principles. The sixth stage of your transformation confronts the reality that most people spend their entire lives avoiding the inevitability of death. This may seem morbid or depressing, but I discovered that regularly contemplating mortality is actually the key to living fully, authentically, and without fear. Death is not the enemy of a meaningful life. It is what gives life its urgency, clarity, and preciousness. I learned this lesson most powerfully during the Antonine Plague, when death surrounded me daily, and I faced the very real possibility that I might not survive to see another year. Instead of filling me with despair, this proximity to mortality brought extraordinary clarity about what truly mattered and what was merely distraction. When you truly accept that your time is limited, several profound shifts occur in your perspective. First, trivial concerns lose their power to disturb your peace. The petty workplace politics, the social slights, the minor inconveniences that normally occupy so much mental energy suddenly seem insignificant when viewed against the backdrop of mortality. Second, you begin to prioritize your time and energy based on your deepest values rather than on immediate pressures or social expectations. When you remember that you have limited days remaining, you become much more selective about how you spend those days and much more intentional about the character you want to develop during your remaining time. Third, you develop what I call death-focused courage, the willingness to live authentically and take meaningful risks, because the greatest risk is not failure, but reaching the end of life having never truly lived according to your highest principles. For these 10 days, practice what I call mortality meditation. Each morning, spend a few minutes contemplating the reality that this could be your last day on earth. This is not meant to create anxiety, but to bring clarity about what really matters to you. Ask yourself, if I knew I would die tonight, how would I want to spend a day? What would I want to say to the people I love? What actions would I want to take? Then live that day according to those priorities. Also practice what I call legacy thinking. Regularly consider what you want to be remembered for after you are gone. What impact do you want your life to have had? What character do you want people to remember? What contributions do you want to have made? This perspective helps you focus on actions and choices that create lasting value rather than temporary pleasure or convenience. The contemplation of death also teaches the precious nature of time. When you truly understand that your days are numbered, you become much more mindful of how you spend your hours. You waste less time on activities that do not align with your values and invest more time in relationships, growth, and meaningful work. I found that thinking about death regularly actually reduced my fear of death while increasing my appreciation for life. When you accept mortality as natural and inevitable, you stop wasting energy on the impossible task of avoiding it and instead focus on the possible task of living well before it arrives. During these days, also practice gratitude for the simple fact of being alive. Each morning when you awaken, take a moment to appreciate the miraculous nature of consciousness, breath, sensation, and thought. These basic experiences, which we usually take for granted, become precious when viewed through the lens of mortality. The goal is not to become obsessed with death, but to use the reality of mortality as a teacher that clarifies priorities, eliminates petty concerns, and motivates authentic living. When you live each day aware that it is a gift that will not last forever, you naturally live with greater intention, deeper appreciation, and clearer purpose. The seventh stage of your transformation addresses one of the most practical challenges of daily life, maintaining your virtue and inner peace while dealing with people who seem determined to disturb both. During my years as emperor, I discovered that difficult people are not obstacles to spiritual growth. They are some of our most valuable teachers, providing opportunities to practice patience, compassion, and wisdom that pleasant people never could. I remember a particular senator who seemed to oppose every policy I proposed, not from principled disagreement, but from what appeared to be personal animosity. He would interrupt my speeches, spread rumors about my character, and rally others to resist initiatives that would clearly benefit the empire. My initial response was frustration and anger. How could someone be so unreasonable and destructive? But over time, I began to see this senator as one of my most valuable teachers. His constant opposition forced me to develop better arguments for my policies, to consider viewpoints I might otherwise have ignored, and to practice patience and composure under pressure. His difficult behavior became a training ground for virtues I needed to develop as a leader. This shift in perspective transforms your relationship to every challenging person in your life. Instead of seeing them as problems to be solved or avoided, you begin to see them as opportunities for character development. The colleague who criticizes you unfairly becomes practice for maintaining confidence in your worth. The family member who pushes your buttons becomes training for emotional regulation. The stranger who treats you rudely becomes an opportunity to practice compassion for someone who is clearly suffering. For these 10 days, practice what I call difficult person reframing. Whenever someone acts in ways that trigger your frustration, anger, or anxiety, immediately ask yourself, what virtue is this person giving me the opportunity to practice? How is this interaction helping me become stronger, wiser, or more compassionate? This approach does not mean accepting abuse or failing to set appropriate boundaries. It means maintaining your inner peace and commitment to virtue regardless of how others choose to behave. You protect yourself practically while responding spiritually from your highest self rather than reacting emotionally from your triggered ego. Also practice what I call the divine spark recognition. I learned to see every person, no matter how difficult their behavior, as carrying within them the same divine spark of consciousness that exists within me. Their behavior might be misguided, harmful, or frustrating, but their essential nature remains worthy of respect. This perspective helps you respond to their humanity rather than merely reacting to their behavior. Most difficult behavior stems from pain, fear, insecurity, or unmet needs that the person themselves may not fully understand. The colleague who constantly criticizes others is likely struggling with deep insecurity. The family member who always creates drama may be desperately seeking attention or connection. The stranger who treats you rudely is probably dealing with problems you cannot see. When you remember this, it becomes easier to respond with patience and compassion rather than defensiveness and anger. This does not mean excusing harmful behavior or failing to protect yourself, but it means understanding the human motivations behind difficult behavior and responding from wisdom rather than reaction. Practice what I call emotional aikido, the art of redirecting negative energy rather than meeting it with resistance. When someone approaches you with anger, respond with calm curiosity about their concerns. When someone criticizes you unfairly, thank them for their perspective while maintaining confidence in your own worth. When someone tries to provoke you, respond with kindness that diffuses their negativity. The ultimate goal is to become so grounded in your own virtue and self-worth that other people's behavior loses its power to disturb your peace. You remain open to feedback, willing to consider different perspectives, and ready to adjust your actions when appropriate. But you no longer allow other people's emotions, opinions, or behaviors to control your inner state. By the end of these 10 days, you will have developed what I consider one of the most valuable life skills: the ability to maintain your virtue and peace of mind, regardless of how others choose to behave around you. The eighth stage of your transformation introduces you to what I consider the most profound realization of my philosophical journey: sympathia, the interconnectedness of all existence. This Stoic principle taught me that individual self-mastery is not a solitary pursuit, but part of a larger cosmic order in which every person's growth contributes to the well-being of the whole. I first grasped this concept during a clear night on the Germanic frontier, when I stepped outside my tent and gazed up at the vast tapestry of stars. In that moment, I realized that the same forces that held those distant suns in their courses also moved through my own thoughts and decisions. I was not separate from the universe. I was a conscious expression of it, temporarily given the responsibility to contribute wisdom, justice, and virtue to the greater whole. This understanding transformed my perspective on leadership and personal development. I began to see that my efforts to master myself were not primarily for my own benefit, but for the benefit of every person whose life I would touch. When I developed patience, I made the world more patient. When I practiced justice, I strengthened justice everywhere. When I embodied wisdom, I added wisdom to the collective human experience. Sympathia teaches that you exist within an interconnected web of relationships and influences that extends far beyond what you can see or measure. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions ripple outward in ways you may never know, affecting family members, colleagues, strangers, and even future generations. The character you develop does not exist in isolation. It becomes part of the world's character. For these 10 days, practice what I call cosmic perspective. Begin each day by remembering that you are part of something much larger than your individual concerns. Your challenges, goals, and growth are not separate from the larger human story. They are contributions to it. This perspective does not diminish the importance of your individual life, but places it within a context that gives it deeper meaning and purpose. Also, practice what I call universal service. Look for opportunities to contribute to the common good through your daily actions, decisions, and interactions. This might mean offering help to a struggling colleague, choosing honesty in a situation where dishonesty would be easier, or simply bringing patience and kindness to routine encounters with strangers. The practice of sympathia also means recognizing that other people's well-being is ultimately connected to your own well-being. When you help others develop wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline, you strengthen these qualities in the world and make it more likely that you will encounter them in your own life. When you respond to others' mistakes with patience and understanding, you contribute to a culture of forgiveness that will benefit you when you make mistakes. I learned to see every interaction as an opportunity to practice what I call elevation rather than degradation. In every conversation, relationship, and encounter, you can choose to elevate the other person's mood, confidence, wisdom, or virtue, or you can choose actions that degrade their spirit. The choice you make affects not just that person, but everyone they will subsequently encounter. Practice viewing your personal development as a form of service to humanity. When you develop emotional regulation, you become someone who brings stability to chaotic situations. When you cultivate wisdom, you become a source of good counsel for others. When you embody virtue, you provide an example that inspires others to reach for their own highest potential. The ultimate realization of sympathia is that there is no meaningful distinction between self-improvement and world improvement. They are the same process viewed from different perspectives. As you master yourself, you contribute to the mastery of humanity. As you develop virtue, you strengthen virtue everywhere. This perspective eliminates the false choice between caring for yourself and caring for others. The best thing you can do for the world is to become the best version of yourself. And the best way to become your best self is to serve something greater than your individual interests. The final 10 days of your transformation focus on integrating all the practices you have learned into a unified way of being. True self-mastery is not about perfect execution of individual techniques, but about the seamless integration of perception, action, and will into a coherent philosophy of living. You are no longer practicing virtue. You are becoming virtue itself. During my later years as emperor, I reached a point where the Stoic practices I had once consciously applied became as natural as breathing. I no longer had to remind myself to view obstacles as opportunities. My mind automatically sought the hidden advantages in every challenge. I no longer had to force myself to respond with patience to difficult people. Patience had become my natural response to human folly and struggle. This is the integration you are approaching in these final days. The practices that initially required conscious effort and deliberate choice begin to operate automatically. Your character has been fundamentally reshaped through 90 days of consistent practice, and new patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting have become deeply ingrained. For these 10 days, practice what I call unconscious competence with the virtues you have been developing. Pay attention to moments when you automatically respond with wisdom, rather than having to consciously choose wisdom. Notice when patience, courage, justice, and self-discipline arise naturally, rather than through deliberate effort. Also focus on what I call principle-based living, making decisions based on your core values rather than on external pressures, immediate emotions, or temporary circumstances. By now, you should have clarity about the principles that guide your life and the character you want to embody in all situations. The sign of true integration is that your responses become predictable to yourself because they flow from established character rather than fluctuating moods or circumstances. People around you begin to know what to expect from you because you have become consistent in your embodiment of virtue. During these days, also practice what I call teaching through being. One of the most reliable indicators of mastery is the ability to inspire others toward virtue simply through your example. When people see how you handle stress, respond to setbacks, deal with difficult people, and maintain your values under pressure, they naturally want to develop similar strength and wisdom. This does not mean becoming preachy or self-righteous, but simply living in such a way that your life becomes a demonstration of what is possible when someone commits to self-mastery. Your calm presence in chaotic situations teaches others about inner peace. Your patient responses to provocation teach others about emotional regulation. Your principled decisions in difficult circumstances teach others about integrity. Practice what I call effortless virtue, the state where doing the right thing becomes easier than doing the wrong thing because your character has been fundamentally transformed. Telling the truth becomes more natural than lying. Acting with courage becomes more comfortable than acting from fear. Choosing patience becomes more automatic than choosing anger. The final integration involves what I call meta-awareness, consciousness of your own consciousness, awareness of your own character development, and the ability to continue growing even after achieving significant mastery. You become your own teacher, constantly observing your responses and adjusting your approach to become more aligned with your highest values. By day 90, you should feel a profound shift in your relationship to life's challenges. What once overwhelmed you now strengthens you. What once triggered automatic reactions now prompts conscious responses. What once seemed impossible to control, your emotions, your thoughts, your character, now responds reliably to your guidance. The person who began this journey 90 days ago and the person completing it are fundamentally different, not because external circumstances have changed, but because your inner world has been completely transformed. You have built the inner citadel and learned to live within its unassailable walls. As I reflect on 19 years of ruling an empire while pursuing the philosophical life, I see now that the combination of practical action and contemplative wisdom creates something far more powerful than either could achieve alone. The warrior philosopher does not retreat from the world to find truth, nor does he engage with the world while abandoning inner development. He brings both together in a synthesis that transforms not just himself, but everyone his life touches. When I first took the purple, I believed I had to choose between the demands of leadership and the pursuit of wisdom. The Senate required decisive action, the military needed strong command, the citizens demanded effective governance. How could I find time for philosophical reflection when the empire demanded constant attention to practical affairs? But I discovered that this was a false choice. The deeper I went into philosophical practice, the more effective I became as a leader. The more I developed inner strength, the better I could handle external pressures. The more I mastered myself, the more capable I became of serving others. Action and contemplation were not competing priorities, but complementary aspects of a complete life. The warrior aspect of the warrior philosopher embraces engagement with the world's challenges. This means taking responsibility for outcomes, making difficult decisions with incomplete information, standing up for justice even when it costs you personally, and acting with courage when action is required. The warrior does not avoid life's battles, but enters them equipped with virtue as his armor. The philosopher aspect brings wisdom, perspective, and inner stability to worldly engagement. This means understanding the temporary nature of all external conditions, maintaining emotional equilibrium regardless of circumstances, viewing obstacles as opportunities for growth, and keeping sight of eternal principles amid changing situations. Together, these aspects create an unshakable character that can engage fully with life while remaining centered in wisdom. The warrior philosopher acts decisively but without attachment to results. He fights for justice but without hatred for opponents. He leads others but without ego-driven need for recognition. He faces death without fear but lives each day with appreciation for its gift. This combination creates what I call principled effectiveness, the ability to achieve meaningful results while maintaining moral integrity. Most people believe they must compromise their values to be effective in the world, or sacrifice effectiveness to maintain their values. The warrior philosopher proves this false by demonstrating that virtue and effectiveness reinforce each other when properly understood. The legacy of this approach extends far beyond personal achievement. When you combine inner mastery with outer engagement, you become a force for elevation in whatever sphere you operate. Your family experiences more stability and wisdom. Your workplace benefits from your principled leadership. Your community gains a citizen who contributes to the common good. But perhaps most importantly, you become an example of what is possible when someone commits fully to both self-development and service to others. Your life demonstrates that it is possible to maintain virtue in corrupt environments, to find peace amid chaos, to act with courage in the face of uncertainty, and to lead with wisdom while bearing heavy responsibilities. This demonstration is your gift to future generations, proof that the philosophical life is not an escape from the world, but the best possible preparation for engaging with the world effectively. When others see how you handle pressure, respond to setbacks, treat difficult people, and maintain your principles under stress, they glimpse possibilities for their own lives that they might never have imagined. The warrior philosopher's ultimate legacy is not any particular achievement, but the character developed through the integration of contemplation and action, wisdom and courage, self-mastery, and service to others. The completion of your 90-day transformation marks not an ending, but a beginning. You have built the foundation of self-mastery, developed essential practices, and experienced the power of living according to philosophical principles. Now comes the deeper challenge, maintaining and deepening this transformation throughout the changing circumstances of a lifetime. I learned this lesson during my final years as emperor, when age, illness, and the weight of decades in power tested every principle I had developed. It would have been easy to abandon my practices when physical strength declined, when trusted advisors died, when the empire faced new threats that seemed insurmountable. But this is precisely when philosophical training proves its greatest value, not during easy times when virtue requires little effort, but during difficult times when virtue demands everything you have. The key to sustaining long-term transformation is understanding that self-mastery is not a destination you reach, but a practice you maintain. There is no graduation from the school of virtue, no moment when you can declare yourself fully developed and cease your efforts. Every day offers new opportunities for growth, new challenges that test your character, new situations that requires wisdom you have not yet fully developed. For this lifelong practice, establish what I call philosophical sustainability, a rhythm of growth that you can maintain regardless of changing external circumstances. This means adapting your practices to fit different life stages, energy levels, and responsibilities while maintaining their essential spirit. Your morning preparation may need to be shortened during busy periods, but it should never be abandoned entirely. Your evening reflection may need to be simplified when you are exhausted, but the habit of examining your day's responses should remain constant. Your commitment to virtue may need to be applied to new situations, but the commitment itself should never waver. Also develop what I call philosophical flexibility, the ability to apply timeless principles to new circumstances. The Stoic practices that served you during your initial 90 days will need to evolve as your life evolves. The patience you developed for dealing with difficult colleagues may need to be applied to aging parents. The courage you cultivated for speaking truth at work may need to be redirected toward facing health challenges or financial setbacks. The deeper you go into philosophical living, the more you realize that every stage of life offers unique opportunities for character development. Youth provides energy for building habits and testing principles. Middle age offers responsibility for applying wisdom in leadership roles. Later years bring perspective and the opportunity to mentor others on the path. Maintain what I call beginner's mind, even as you develop mastery. Continue to approach each day as a student, curious about what new insights you might discover, what character qualities you might develop, what service you might offer. The moment you believe you have mastered virtue completely is the moment you stop growing. Build relationships with others who share your commitment to philosophical living. Surround yourself with people who inspire you toward your highest potential, who challenge you to grow, who remind you of your values when you are tempted to abandon them. The path of self-mastery is easier when traveled in the company of fellow seekers. Most importantly, remember that the ultimate purpose of your philosophical practice is not personal perfection, but service to the larger community of humanity. As you continue to grow in wisdom, strength, and virtue, you become increasingly valuable to others who are struggling with the same challenges you have learned to master. Your ongoing transformation becomes a gift to the world, proof that human beings can transcend their circumstances, master their reactions, and live according to their highest values, regardless of external pressures. As I near the end of my earthly reign, having spent decades applying these principles in the crucible of empire and the laboratory of daily life, I want to share with you the deepest lessons that can only be learned through years of consistent practice. These insights represent the distilled wisdom of a lifetime spent pursuing the philosophical path while bearing the heaviest responsibilities. The first and most profound lesson is this: there is an immeasurable difference between knowing philosophy intellectually and living it practically. I could recite Stoic principles from memory within months of beginning my studies, but it took years of daily application before these principles became integrated into my character so deeply that they guided my responses automatically. The transformation you seek cannot be achieved through understanding alone, no matter how complete that understanding becomes. It requires the patient, persistent application of principles in real-world situations until new patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting become second nature. Knowledge points the way, but only practice creates the journey. I have learned that self-mastery becomes effortless only after tremendous effort has been invested in developing it. In my early years of philosophical practice, choosing virtue over vice required constant vigilance and deliberate decision-making. Every response had to be consciously selected, every emotion deliberately regulated, every action carefully aligned with principles. But through decades of consistent practice, virtue became the path of least resistance. Telling the truth became easier than maintaining lies. Acting with courage required less energy than living in fear. Responding with patience demanded less effort than indulging in anger. The character I had built through years of discipline now carried me forward with minimal conscious effort. This is the promise of committed philosophical practice. What begins as difficult conscious work eventually becomes natural, automatic expression of who you have become. But this transformation occurs only through consistent application over time, not through sporadic bursts of intense effort followed by periods of neglect. I have also learned that the peace that comes from aligning your actions with your deepest values is unlike any other form of satisfaction. External achievements, military victories, political successes, material acquisitions provide temporary pleasure that quickly fades and requires constant renewal. But the satisfaction of living according to virtue creates a deep, abiding peace that grows stronger with time. When your thoughts, words, and actions flow from the same source, your commitment to wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline, you experience an integration that eliminates internal conflict. You no longer waste energy fighting yourself, questioning your choices, or managing the cognitive dissonance that comes from acting against your values. The final lesson I offer is that the philosophical life is ultimately about love. Love for truth, love for virtue, love for other human beings, and love for the cosmic order of which we are all temporary expressions. When you truly master yourself, you discover that the self you have mastered is not separate from the larger self that encompasses all existence. This love motivates the discipline, sustains the effort, and justifies the challenges of the philosophical path. You practice virtue not because it is required, but because you love what virtue creates. You develop self-mastery not because you must, but because you love what becomes possible when you are no longer at the mercy of uncontrolled thoughts and emotions. My final advice to you is simple. Begin again each day with the commitment to live according to your highest understanding, forgive yourself when you fall short, and continue practicing until virtue becomes as natural as breathing. You stand now at the threshold of your own empire, not an empire of territory or subjects, but the far more valuable empire of self-sovereignty. After 90 days of disciplined practice, you possess the tools, insights, and character strength necessary to rule the only domain that truly belongs to you, your own mind, emotions, and responses to life's inevitable challenges. Every person who walks this earth is, in truth, the emperor or empress of their own existence. You have absolute authority over your thoughts, complete control over your responses, and unlimited power to choose the character you will embody each day. This sovereignty cannot be granted by others, taken away by circumstances, or lost through external setbacks. It can only be abdicated through neglect of the inner work required to maintain it. Your empire includes every relationship you influence, every decision you make, every example you set, and every moment of peace or chaos you create in the world around you. The quality of your reign determines not just your own experience of life, but the experience of everyone whose life intersects with yours. Like any empire, yours requires active, conscious leadership. The practices you have developed over these 90 days are not temporary exercises, but permanent responsibilities of enlightened rulership. Your morning preparation is the daily council session where you set policy for your reign. Your evening reflection is the review where you assess the day's decisions and plan improvements for tomorrow. The territories of your empire are vast and varied. You rule over your response to success and failure, your treatment of friends and enemies, your choices in solitude and in company, your decisions under pressure and in comfort. Each of these territories requires your attention, wisdom, and care. But with this sovereignty comes profound responsibility. When you truly master yourself, you become accountable not just for your own well-being, but for the influence your character has on others. Your patience or impatience, your courage or cowardice, your wisdom or foolishness ripples outward in ways you may never fully comprehend. The example you set teaches others what is possible. When people see you maintain composure under pressure, they learn that such composure is achievable. When they witness you responding to difficulty with grace, they understand that grace is a choice available to them. When they observe you choosing virtue over convenience, they realize that such choices are within their own power. Your empire also extends into the future. The character you build today becomes the foundation for every decision you will make, every challenge you will face, and every opportunity you will encounter for the rest of your life. The habits of thought and response you establish now will serve you through circumstances you cannot yet imagine. Begin your reign with the understanding that true power lies not in controlling others, but in the complete mastery of yourself. Lead your empire with the wisdom you have developed, the courage you have cultivated, and the virtue you have made your own. Your subjects, your thoughts, emotions, and responses await your enlightened leadership. Your territories, your relationships, responsibilities, and daily choices require your wise governance. Your legacy, the impact of your character on the world, depends on how well you exercise the sovereignty you have earned. The crown of self-mastery sits upon your head. Your empire awaits your rule. What kind of emperor will you be? My time with you draws to a close, as all things must in the natural order of existence. But the wisdom we have shared together, these principles that sustained me through plague and war, triumph and loss, the burdens of empire and the joys of understanding, this wisdom is eternal. It belongs not to any single person or era, but to the human spirit itself. You carry forward now something precious that was given to me by teachers who came before, just as it was given to them by their predecessors, reaching back through an unbroken chain of seekers who understood that the greatest victory any person can achieve is victory over themselves. This wisdom has survived the fall of empires, the passing of civilizations, and the deaths of countless individuals because it speaks to what is permanent in human nature. The principles you have learned will serve you through whatever challenges await you in the years ahead. When circumstances test your resolve, when difficult people challenge your patience, when setbacks threaten your peace of mind, you will discover again and again that the inner citadel you have built cannot be breached by any external force. More importantly, you will find opportunities to pass this wisdom forward to others who struggle as you once struggled, who seek the peace you have found, who need the strength you have developed. Your transformation becomes complete not when you achieve perfect mastery, for that is a lifelong journey, but when you become a source of inspiration and guidance for others, beginning their own path of self-discovery. The torch of ancient wisdom passes from hand to hand across the generations. Today I place it in yours. Guard it carefully, practice it faithfully, and when the time comes, pass it forward with the same generous spirit in which it was given to you. Remember that every sunrise offers you a fresh opportunity to practice virtue. Every challenge provides new chances to demonstrate courage. Every interaction allows you to embody wisdom. The philosopher's work is never finished because life continuously creates new situations in which to apply eternal principles. As I return to the eternal quiet from which all wisdom springs, I leave you with this final truth. You possess, within yourself, everything necessary for a life of meaning, purpose, and unshakable peace. The kingdom of self-mastery is yours to rule. The crown of virtue is yours to wear. The legacy of wisdom is yours to leave. May you rule yourself with justice, treat others with compassion, face challenges with courage, and meet all circumstances with the tranquil confidence that comes from knowing that whatever may happen to you, nothing can happen that will diminish the worth of your character or the value of your commitment to virtue. The student has become the teacher. The empire is yours. Rule well.